Chapter 3, The Ignorance Distance. Everyone knows someone like Cousin Maggie. She's one of the best conversationalists you've ever met. When she returns from the grocery store, her account of the trip sounds like a fascinating adventure, even though nothing out of the ordinary has actually occurred. Cousin Maggie is a leading light in several women's clubs, and when it's her turn to speak to the literary society, she doesn't prepare a paper. She just makes a few notes and then gets up on her feet and talks the full allotted time and 10 minutes more, without the slightest difficulty. And the members always enjoy Cousin Maggie's talks. But suddenly there comes the day when Cousin Maggie gets on the train for a tour of the continent. She reaches the Grand Canyon. She loves the Grand Canyon. It feeds her soul with its beauty. Full of the Grand Canyon, she sits down to write to the folks back home. What does our raconteur's letter say? The Grand Canyon is simply wonderful. You should see it by moonlight. It's marvelous. The nights are cold. The food is excellent. Quite a number of Indians around here. Love and kisses. Cousin Maggie's writing ability obviously bears no resemblance to her ability as a speaker. Possibly Cousin Maggie explains why most of the sales managers Aesop Glim has met seem to feel that they can't write. It is always something of a pleasure to watch a potent, vocal spellbinder perspiring and chewing his tongue when he tries his hand at a bit of composition. This strange humility in an otherwise dominant personality can be a great comfort to us as copywriters. Unfortunately, not all of these same sales managers remember their own labor pains when they are invited to criticize our copy. They may admit that they don't know how to write it, but they are very certain they know how to tear it to pieces. Inasmuch as talking and writing use the same words and the same ideas, we can call them twin arts. Twins, but not identical twins. Their techniques differ in too many ways. These differences in technique undoubtedly account for the writer who gets tongue-tied on his feet, just as much as for the speaker who gets pen-tied over a bit of writing. Perhaps the differences seem more mysterious than they are. It is Aesop Glim's contention that it is perfectly possible for the average speaker to learn to write, and conversely for the average writer to learn to speak, thus assuming that there is any reason for anyone to want to be able to do both. We are concerned with the question of how to write persuasive advertising copy. Our discussion of speaking versus writing concerns us because the beginner copywriter, who isn't yet writing very good copy, has a lot in common with the speaker who thinks he can't write. He is facing what is primarily a mental hazard. This mental hazard produces a self-consciousness which, in turn, gets his eye off the ball. He gets to thinking about the wrong things and worrying about the wrong things. Let us try to visualize the major differences between speaking and writing. And for our immediate purposes, let us remember that we are primarily concerned with selling by speaking versus selling by writing. The speaker, being present in the flesh, can feel out his audience, find his course, change his tactics, correct his errors, and answer the unexpected question. Moreover, it is to be assumed that his personality and mannerisms are sufficiently interesting to compensate for what, in writing, would be a great lack of smoothness. The writer must correct his errors and discard his unnecessary statements in advance. Assuming equal facility, the speaker obviously has somewhat the better of the writer. He cannot get away with it if he's only 60% right at the start of his talk. He can be less fully prepared and then make adjustments as his talk progresses. And that is the crux of the whole matter. The writer must be fully prepared before he starts writing. His preparation lies in assembling a full set of facts and ideas. These he must set down on paper, in a logical sequence. He must do this before he starts to write. Facts, ideas, and sequence, all strong enough and tight enough to win a reading, hold attention, and establish conviction. What he is about to write needs to be diagrammed before he starts to write. Only in this way can the writer know that he has a complete story to present, with no errors or omissions, and that he has included the answers to all the questions the reader is going to ask. The experienced copywriter frequently does a good deal of this diagramming in his head. His preliminary paperwork may not always be as detailed as the beginner's needs to be. But be sure of this. His present ability to construct copy in his head is the result of having previously constructed several hundred pieces of copy. The beginner should not attempt this mental arithmetic. Aesop Glim guarantees that the would-be writer who will diagram his writing, on paper, before he starts to write, will find life a whole lot easier. Once he convinces himself that he has made a good assembly of facts, ideas, and sequence, he is quite apt to find that the actual writing is no longer a chore. His former self-consciousness disappears in the face of a new self-confidence. When the writer is saturated with enough facts and ideas and sure of the sequence in which he wants to present them, he suddenly finds that the right writing words come flowing out of his pen almost as rapidly as he can put them down. Because he now has confidence in the strength of his story, he is no longer self-conscious over his choice of words. Suddenly he knows that the words themselves are practically incidental to the ideas and the sequence. Sound copy doesn't just happen, it doesn't just flow, it gets constructed. Our copy policy must show both the material we are going to use and the sequence in which we are going to present it. Our form of construction is that which Aesop Glim calls the copywriter's eternal triangle. He makes no pretension to having invented this formula. He merely codified it, partly from actual precepts given him by experienced copywriters, partly from observation of effective advertisements. As a matter of fact, it is quite easy to discover that this form of sequence construction is consciously or unconsciously practiced by many copywriters who have probably never thought of it as a triangle, a parallelepipedon, or anything else. It gives us a natural and effective sequence in which to present the various parts of our story, to the end that they shall be accepted with a minimum of resistance and a minimum of conscious effort by prospects who have no particular desire to read our advertisement in the first place. There are a number of questions which are asked about the triangle with amazing frequency. The first is, does the triangle apply to all copy? Calling this form of construction the copywriter's eternal triangle was not done solely by way of a come-on, not solely to suggest that sex might occasionally rear its lovely head in the life of a copywriter. And so we will answer the question above by pointing out that eternal means always. In the never humble opinion of Aesop Glim, the accurate application of the triangle applies to every piece of educational or reason why copy. Whenever you have sales arguments to present, whenever your copy aims to tell your prospect something he does not know, you have use for the triangle. We would probably have to indulge in pretty fancy philosophy to demonstrate that the triangle applies to reminder or display copy. If our only need is to keep our prospects reminded of our wares, it is hard to prove that we have much of a construction problem. Our story is begun and ended in 14 words or less. We can think of the readers of the publication we are going to use as people in small boats going up and down a river. At some distance from the bank of the river is a mystic point of sale. This is the point at which our prospects will know as much about the virtues of our wares as do we. We speak of this distance between the bank of the river and the point of sale as the ignorance distance. It is determined by the amount of our prospect's ignorance. Once our fact-finding has told us how great this ignorance is, then we can start to function as copywriters. It is then our job to construct a piece of copy which will bridge and thereby overcome our prospect's ignorance. Our fact-finding must have told us not only what our prospect does not know, but also what he does know. If he knows little or nothing about our wares, we must start our conversation with something he does know. We must establish a common meeting ground, a place from which we can lead and educate him step by step. Our theoretically perfect triangle has 6 steps: arresting power, substantiation, transition, competition, your product, RSVP, point of sale. Number 1. Arresting power. This is the material which we use for headline and main illustration. Thinking once again of our audience as people in boats going up and down a stream, our arresting power is the attractive landing place we erect on the bank of that stream, and the bait we use to make those who are our prospects stop at our landing place. Remember, we use only the kind of bait which will interest those who are our prospects. Number 2. Substantiation. In the event that our headline has been a bit startling, perhaps even something not readily believable, our substantiation is the material which proves that the headline is truthful. This substantiation may be made in either the subhead or the opening sentences. We cannot leave a startling, hard-to-believe headline unsupported. Number 3. Transition. Assuming that we had to go a bit afield from our true subject in order to establish a common meeting ground with our prospects, our transition consists of the sentences which get us over from the subject with which we opened the conversation to the subject we really want to discuss with our prospects, the kind of goods we want to sell. Number 4, competition. Now that we have our prospect in open discussion of the kind of goods we want to sell him, here is the point at which we may imply that competitive goods lack some of the virtues they should have. There is no rule that says you must knock your competitor's goods. Aesop Glim believes it is rarely necessary. Number 5, your product. Now we are ready to talk very definitely and straight from the shoulder about the virtues of our wares. Everything we have done up to this point has been a build-up for this opportunity to do so. Assuming that there was a good deal of ignorance on the part of our prospect, assuming also that we had to go quite a bit afield in order to establish contact, the 4 steps preceding may have required a good many sentences. They were still only the build-up. They do not in any way indicate that we must now hurry through our story. Always make the most of this opportunity to do your product full justice. Number 6, RSVP. This is the business ending of our advertisement. If step number 5 has been well done, we now have our prospect interested in doing something about what we have told him. He must not say, "So what?" We must tell him what we want him to do and be specific about it. Fill in the coupon below. Write for our booklet. Go and see a specific kind of dealer and ask for a specific kind of demonstration, test, sample, or trial package. Always remember, the triangle indicates merely the sequence for our story. It does not in any way dictate how many words or how few words shall be devoted to each of its parts. That ratio varies with each situation. Now let's see how this works. Arresting power. Our illustration shows a picture of an automobile, not new but in good running condition, parked beside an obviously tired and worn-out airplane. Our headline says, "Here's why airplanes wear out." A subhead says, "And why your automobile enjoys a longer life." Our opening paragraph, substantiation, says, "Airplanes literally fly themselves to pieces. Their lives are short because they are lived at such an intense pace. The molecules never get a chance to rest and adjust themselves, whereas your automobile is driven, then rested. The molecules readjust themselves each time you park your car." Transition. The difference is simply the secret of relaxation. It is a secret many great men have known, and to which they have attributed much of their success. Some read detective stories, some play chess, some have more expensive hobbies from which they gain relaxation. You and I can profit from this lesson. Perhaps we can't afford expensive hobbies or clubs or yachts, but we can still share in this secret of relaxation. Our product. In the middle of every morning and in the middle of every afternoon, we can leave our desks, go out and brush our teeth with Ferbabent's sparkling glycerin toothpaste. This amazing new dentifrice, and only this one, contains a secret new ingredient which is cooling and refreshing to the mouth, produces an instant feeling of relaxation and exaltation. RSVP. Go to your druggist today and get 2 tubes of Ferbabent's sparkling glycerin toothpaste. Keep one at home, take one to the office. Start tomorrow to enjoy the benefits of this easy, economical, practical, relaxing, and exhilarating road to efficiency and success. Our airplane dentifrice copy policy is a parody, but literally not an exaggeration, of an advertising campaign which once ran and failed dismally. Step 4 was almost entirely omitted. Competitive products were knocked only to the extent of implying that no other dentifrice contained this new cooling ingredient, alcohol. Otherwise, this is the outline of a theoretically perfect application of the triangle. It contains all the steps in the proper sequence. And while our parody is a bit telegraphic, please accept the word of Aesop Glim that the original campaign represented the highest craftsmanship in every detail of layout, illustration, and verbiage. If this was a theoretically perfect triangle construction, and if the advertising craftsmanship was so much above average, why did the campaign fail? The answer is the ignorance distance of the audience had been misgauged. The preliminary buildup was too ornate, top-heavy. It was not necessary to go so far afield, through the hobbies of great men and the molecular diseases of the airplane. to establish a common meeting ground with those who are prospects for a new dentifrice. Does the triangle apply to trade and technical copy? Does the triangle apply to retail advertising? Or an agency copywriter may say, I have a lot of trouble with the openings for my advertisements. My clients want me to start right out talking about their goods. How hard should I fight for the first 3 steps of the triangle? The answers to all 3 questions revolve around the problem of accurately gauging the ignorance distance of the audience to which we are writing. If we presuppose more knowledge than our prospects possess, we will fail to go far enough to establish a common meeting ground. Our copy will be short-circuited. Our triangle will stop short of the point of sale. Our horrible example was a case of overshooting. Our manufacturer's aim was to make people use his product instead of competitive products. He was shooting at people who were already using some such products. He obviously did not expect, with this kind of copy, to make toothbrushes of many people who were not already addicted to the habit. His campaign would have had more chance of success if his opening construction had not led him so far afield. As it was, his readers did not become buyers, either because they were bored before they ever found out what he was talking about, or because they were overcome by incredulous amazement. The following ground rules are intended to demonstrate why the triangle construction applies to all forms of reason why or educational copy. In other words, everything but reminder copy. The ignorance distance is a fact. It is a fact to be determined by fact-finding, not by the guess of the advertiser or the copywriter. Our fact-finding tells us how much or how little our prospect knows about the subject in which we want to interest him. Simultaneously, it tells us what else he does know, what his other interests may be. If his ignorance of our immediate subject is not great, we can obviously get into a discussion of our wares far sooner than otherwise. But if his ignorance is great, then we will probably have to go over into the realm of something he does know in order to find the point at which we establish a common meeting ground with him. Our headline and illustration find their subject matter in this common meeting ground, as close to our subject as our prospect's knowledge permits, somewhat removed from our subject if our prospect's ignorance is great. If our headline requires proof, we substantiate it before we take the next step. If we have had to go somewhat afield from our basic subject, we now make a transition from the opening related subject into the specific field in which our wares function. Having led our prospect into our own field, we now knock our competitors' wares, if we are going to do so, before we set forth the virtues of our own wares. Now we are ready to talk about our own product. If it has taken us a long time to get to this point, that may be too bad, but it was a necessary evil. Our somewhat lengthy introduction was entirely the result of preliminary fact-finding, which told us that a somewhat lengthy introduction was needed. We did not make it lengthy solely to demonstrate our command of the English language or our ability to pile Paleon on Asa. But now that we have reached the point where we can talk to our prospect openly and directly about the virtues of our wares, we are going to do our product full justice. We are not going to let the necessary length of our introduction keep us from talking about our product at the necessary length. Having made a good exposition of our wares, we now tell our prospect what we want him to do about the matter. We give him specific, not general, suggestions. The triangle applies to the construction of trade and technical copy, just as surely as to copy for consumer goods. How much does your prospect know about your wares? If he knows a good deal, start talking about your wares just as soon as possible. If he knows very little, start with something he does know and then make a transition into the subject you want to discuss. Too much trade and technical copy seems to be written on the assumption that the readers are men from Mars, rather than human beings like the rest of us. However, it can be proved that architects and doctors and engineers and chemists and factory people are not fundamentally different from the rest of us. They pose as knowing something about their trades and professions, just as we pose as knowing something about copywriting. If they are not buying your wares, there's a good chance that the reason lies largely in their ignorance about your wares. It is certainly safer to give them too much information than too little, and you will definitely have to catch their attention before you get a chance to give them any information at all. When it comes to retail copy, the triangle is still applicable. How elaborate your introduction needs to be is still determined by the ignorance distance of your prospects. If Macy offers nylon stockings at 29 cents a pair, the copy construction problem is not very difficult. There's very little ignorance as to what Macy is or nylons are. Over a great many years, Macy has built up a reputation for dependable merchandise and fair practices with its prospects. It is not necessary to start, in each advertisement, to re-educate the public on this part of the story. If Macy says it has nylons of a given grade at a given price, the message is pretty well delivered by the time you've said it. But if an unknown mail-order advertiser were to make the same offer, he would have to include considerable evidence as to who he was and his reliability, and the fact that the nylons were as represented. And if Macy starts selling duplex widgets, they will have just as much of an educational job on duplex widgets as would you. The copywriter must always fight for a copy sequence, which includes as many steps as are necessary to catch the attention of his particular prospects, win their interest, and overcome whatever ignorance exists. Steps 1 to 4 of our triangle are always as brief as the ignorance distance permits. Sometimes some of them are omitted, but the copywriter must never forget that the audience is indifferent, even when not ignorant. He must never let the advertiser's pride of achievement make him assume that anyone, anywhere, wants to read his advertisement. Always include this question in your preliminary analysis. Do my prospects know they are prospects? The triangle can be thought of as a bridge or a funnel, reaching out to arrest the attention of those who are prospects, then steadily narrowing its sides to concentrate their interest on the subject at hand. Interest then supersedes indifference, and knowledge takes the place of ignorance. What is a copy policy? A copy policy is a diagram or blueprint of a number of pieces of copy that are to be written. We might liken it to the architect's plan or blueprint from which a house is built. It specifies all the parts to be used and where they are to go. Unlike the architect's plan, the copy policy, as the name implies, also includes some statement of the purpose or objective of the campaign and the method by which it is to be achieved. There are 3 extra good reasons for having a copy policy. First, it gets all parties concerned into agreement as to the purpose of the whole campaign and what the individual advertisements are to say. This keeps you, the copywriter, from wasting a lot of time, or going off half-cocked, on some messes of verbiage that will not be approved by all other parties concerned. Second, the copy policy keeps you, the copywriter, on the track. You are writing to an agreed objective and on an agreed policy. Never forget that while you may prepare a number of advertisements at one time, those advertisements go out to meet the audience one by one. They do not help one another. You cannot assume that any prospect will see more than one of your advertisements out of the whole campaign. The copy policy serves as your guide and checklist to make certain that you give each and every advertisement full equipment, so that it can stand squarely on its own feet and do an effective job for the advertiser. Too many advertisers and copywriters fondly imagine that the whole world sees, reads, and remembers every word of every advertisement published. From this false premise, they then assume that they can safely tell their story in parts or installments. This makes Aesop Glim's blood boil, as few things can at his age. Advertising does have cumulative effect, but it takes a great deal of both time and money to build cumulative effect. After you have it, you're short-sighted and extravagant to lean on it, even a little. Make up your mind that you are going to send every single advertisement forth fully equipped, to the end that you will be content to rest your case on what this one advertisement does to the reader. Pretend that each advertisement is both the first and the last that will ever appear. The third big reason for having a copy policy is 100% in the copywriter's favor. Once your boss or client has approved a copy policy, your copy gets far less picayune editing. His attention is now focused primarily on whether each piece of copy lives up to the copy policy. He now spends a lot less time trying to ruin your writing with his pet prosody and punctuation. When your copy is written to an approved copy policy, your life becomes a lot easier. What belongs in the copy policy? Probably no 2 advertisers or advertising agencies use the same copy policy formula. Many a top-flight copywriter has his own private checklist. The following seem to Aesop Glim to be the 11 basic ingredients. These broad questions should be asked and answered every time. Who is speaking? Put down the complete name and address of the advertiser. First, to be sure you have all the details correct. Second, to remind yourself that the copywriter is not the person who is speaking. What is being advertised? Some firms offer two or more products or services. Will this copy feature two or more, or only one? Keep this answer as brief as possible. You're not ready for the selling arguments. To what audience? Answer this question as fully as possible. Tell all the pertinent facts you know about those who are prospective buyers of the goods or services to be advertised. Their age, sex, occupation, average income, social position, and where they live all may have a bearing. Where they live may include where geographically and what size of town and even in what type of dwelling. Now you've merely started. What has your preliminary fact-finding taught you about their education and vocabulary? What kinds of words do they use when they are in the mood to be prospective buyers or users of this kind of goods or services? What is their mood or attitude toward goods or services of this kind? Serious, halfway serious, or lighthearted, humorous? Does a purchase of this kind require planning and premeditation, or is it merely a matter of whim or impulse? Which of the four instincts, fear, hunger, sex, and rage, and which of the five senses, sight, touch, smell, hearing, and taste, are involved in a transaction of this kind? Nota bene, which does not mean BS. If you have more than one audience of prospects and can afford a special campaign for each audience, then you must write a special copy policy for each campaign. Some of the answers will vary in important ways. The more homogeneous each audience, the more specific your copy can be. Through what mediums? List or describe them in some detail. Make a note of how far the character of the mediums is helping to select your audience for you. Also, how far the editorial policy and contents, if any, are helping to put your audience into the right frame of mind to accept your message. When? Are goods or services of this type bought only at certain times of the year? Are they bought more often on certain days of the week? The answers may or may not color your copy and suggest your illustration. How? Through what channels are these goods distributed or these services rendered? In what units, pints, quarts, tons, etc., are they bought? The copywriter can pull some lovely boners if he doesn't know these answers. How do we get their attention? What is the subject matter for your illustrations and headlines? The answer to this one should have come out of the preliminary fact-finding. How ignorant or how indifferent are your prospects toward your proposition? Can your headline and/or illustration start with one of the features or advantages of your proposition? Will that arrest their attention? Or must you go a bit afield in order to establish a common meeting ground? A full answer would have three parts. First, an accurate appraisal of the ignorance distance. A factual, detailed description of exactly how much ignorance or indifference exists and the reasons for its existence. Second, either typical headlines such as you propose to use or the subject matter for your headlines. Third, the subject matter for your proposed illustrations. If the illustrations are to have any different appeal from the headlines, give the reasons for the difference. Substantiation and transition? How much of these you need depends entirely upon how far afield it is necessary to go in order to get your prospect's attention. If you can start with some feature or advantage of your proposition, then you are already well into your basic story in the first paragraph. If, on the other hand, it is necessary to go afield, then you certainly need a transition, a connecting link to carry your prospect from the subject matter of your headline to the subject matter of your proposition. And if your headline can in any way challenge belief, then it needs substantiation, proof that it isn't either a trick or an untruth. The sequence then becomes headline, substantiation, transition. What about the competition? First, be sure you know what it is. There are usually several ways to skin a cat. Any product, service, or method that gives approximately the same results as competition. Set down everything that is in any way competition, not merely the products or services that are closely like yours. Second, make up your mind and state in your copy policy what, if anything, you're going to say about your competition. Whatever reference to competition you're going to make should be made after the transition and before you start talking about your own proposition. Get rid of the negative before you get positive about your own goods or service. What is your story? Now you have their attention. by direct or indirect approach according to what the facts of the situation have dictated. Now state your proposition in terms of what your prospects will buy. Never forget that what you sell is almost never what they buy. Record here what your fact finding has disclosed as to your prospects' habits, needs, desires, and tastes, and how your proposition meets them. Decide which features or sales arguments are to be included in each and every advertisement, and if it makes any difference, the sequence in which they are to be presented. Plan in your copy policy for copy that will be exactly long enough to bridge the ignorance distance. Your copy must be exactly long enough to replace ignorance and indifference with knowledge and emotion. What is our business ending? How is your copy to close? Be sure it has a business ending. If you succeed in building knowledge and emotion, tell your prospects, specifically and in detail, what you want them to do about it. Seduction by logic. Aesop Glim is constantly harping on the importance of facts and sequence in the construction of copy. Also on the advantages of saturation over inspiration. This may lead some people to believe that the kind of copy Aesop Glim advocates is only suitable for Thomas's Register or the suite's catalog files. In order to confuse the issue, he has on occasion used some of the same paragraphs in suites and in Better Homes and Gardens. For most products, the bare facts, all the facts and nothing but the facts, usually make for pretty cold copy. In a catalog, we may assume that people are looking for facts, and that we should give them as many as possible as rapidly as possible. But even in a catalog, it pays to remember that it may not always be our product on which the readers are seeking the facts. What can we add to win a hearing for our facts from the readers who aren't currently interested? Certainly in non-catalog copy, newspaper, magazine, or business paper advertisements, we must never assume that the readers are hungry for the facts. We'll starve to death if we wait for our prospects to get hungry. Among other things, our fact-finding tells us who our prospects are. Then we set out to trap them, even before they know they are prospects. Obviously, the bare facts, the sheer virtue of our wares or services, won't do the trick. The bare facts need adornment and a setting. Most of the fact-finding, so persistently advocated by Aesop Glim, is for our own benefit. We must seduce our readers to get their attention, hold their interest, and persuade them to our way of thinking. By way of equipment, we need all the facts we can get. We need facts about the prospect, his mood, his vocabulary, what importance he attaches to such propositions as ours, his habits, his needs, just as much as we need the facts about our products or service. We never show all our cards. We seduce with logic, but the logic is all on our side to be used in planning and building the seduction. We seduce without attacking. Our fact-finding enables us to plan the seduction, cold-bloodedly and with every hope for success. Our copy policy is, among other things, our plan of seduction. Give before you ask. One of the frequent differences between copy written by an amateur and copy written by an experienced advertising man is this. The amateur is too close to the forest to see the trees. He's wholly imbued with what he has to sell. He starts writing too soon, and his copy starts selling too soon. He's too greatly concerned with his side of the situation. He gives too little thought to the prospect's interest, knowledge, habits, needs, and desires, as against which the experienced advertising writer knows that the prospect buys, not the product or service offered, but the end result of possessing it. Simultaneously, the experienced writer assumes that the prospect is either ignorant or indifferent, and that it is therefore necessary to catch his attention and win some measure of interest and confidence before he starts to sell. Give before you ask seems to express it. What you give may be some useful or interesting information, new to the prospect, some suggestion he can use in business or housekeeping or play, or what you give may be merely something the prospect already knows, some factor mentioned that makes the prospect feel that he's on familiar ground. The opportunity to be topical, this is pretty much in the same direction, another opportunity we sometimes have for winning our prospect's confidence. As far as circumstances permit, localize your copy, make it topical. In national magazines and on chain radio hookups, the task is more difficult. But in newspapers and on localized radio, the opportunity is greater. More local color means more familiarity, which means more confidence. a good many people are interested to read in the company paper that our pretty little Gertie of the accounting department is about to be married. They're amused by a question such as why Al Garfinkel, popular member of the inspection department, has suddenly blossomed into a veritable Beau Brummel, which was not formerly his type. You have probably written successful witty items, verses, and even songs for the company paper, or the school paper, or for an amateur theatrical performance. Even beyond their merits, they were surefire, because they were local and topical. If you didn't grow up to be a Cole Porter or a Walter Winchell, as predicted, console yourself. The Porters, Winchells, Peglers, Cowards, Gilberts, and Sullivans make up only a minority of our popular writers, tunesmiths, and columnists. The ability to strike common denominators, to be topical on a nationwide or industry-wide basis, is a rare ability. Let's consider a theoretical case. Our advertiser, maker of something men use, sponsors the broadcasting of prize fights, world championships on national hookups, local fights on independent, local stations. If you had the choice, would you use the same commercials on the local broadcasts as on the national chain hookups? We can, of course, argue that the basic reasons for buying the sponsor's merchandise are the same in every city and town in the country. On the other hand, we do have the chance to be topical, to use local color on the individual station broadcasts. O. Henry and George M. Cohan have made even New York sound like something extra special and not too big. If you live in New York, how would you write the commercials in terms of Canarsie and Spuyten Duyvil, Manhattan and the Bronx, Broadway and Greenwich Village? If you live in some other town, how would you write the commercials in terms of our mayor, our fire chief, Main and 2nd Streets, Market Street, Michigan Boulevard, or the regular patrons of Smith's Drugstore? It is Aesop Glim's opinion that the opportunity to be local and topical is a great privilege, one not to be missed. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to check our link in the description, where you'll find many other fundamental advertising books in different languages. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more persuasion and marketing-related content. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next video.